Hello, Spark fans, and welcome back to Advancing Spark. And yeah, it's one of our last videos of the year, as we are now just at the end of December. And again, apologies, no videos the last couple of weeks because I've been on a holiday, getting some winter sun, enjoying things, coming back to the terrifying madness that's going on in the world. But it's all good. So today, as usual, towards the end of a month, I do a bit of a roundup of the Databricks features that have been released in that given month. And so we've got a load of December updates for Databricks, talk about what's happened in the platform, we've got a new runtime, and we've got a few features that snuck in right to the end of November that we didn't talk about last time, that I just want to quickly point your attention to. So yeah, that's what we're going to do, talk about some new features, have a look at a couple of them, and then generally see what's what. As always, if you're new around here, don't forget to like and subscribe. Feel free to say hello and comment to let us know what you think of these new features. Are any of these things the thing that you have been waiting for? Probably not this month, it's quite a quiet month, but we'll see. But otherwise, let's just have a look at what's going on in the world. Okay, so as usual, I'm on the Azure release notes. We've got the platform release notes. These are kind of the global what's happening on the platform itself. And there is that cheeky little Databricks Runtime we'll have a look at to see what's new on the actual Spark Runtime. So let's just get started. I'm going to dive into the December one, but first things first, I just want to point at a couple of these November ones first that snuck in at the end. So going back down, they're just the top couple that came in on November the 30th. So tags for feature tables, again, if you are using features and you're doing that kind of stuff, searchability of feature tables wasn't that great yet based on the name. Was now being able to tags, being able to just add some metadata to any tables you've got in your feature store, to be able to just quickly search them, quickly pull out any features to do with this kind of thing, or created by this team, or to do with this project or this business area. Use those tags and you can start searching things nicely. Kind of makes sense. This one kind of snuck in. So if you're writing Python and you just slap in a bit of SQL, so whether you're using an expression function or you're doing a spark.table or some spark.sql, and you've got a bit of SQL in there, it was always a bit weird because you just have this big block of text, which was the SQL that you were trying to write with. And then I noticed it when I was just writing some code, and it came up and it started syntax highlighting the string. So that is new. I've got nothing to demo in a minute, but let's do this. So if we go, your data frame is going to be spark.sql. Now, previously, anything I wrote would look a bit like these things. It would just be one big giant blue string. But now I can do select star from, I don't know, my table. And that's all it is. It is just syntax highlighting, making it actually look like proper SQL. So especially if you're doing like a big multi-line SQL string, you know, so you've got like an actual full query that's one's written here. And then someone can actually write it like a bit of SQL, and you can read it nicely and format it and know what's going on in there. So it's quite nice. Fine. You don't get the nice kind of context sensitive kind of format SQL in here that you do in a SQL cell, but otherwise, that's all it is. Nice new little feature. You can go and kind of read SQL nicer when you're doing things, which is all good. The things it does use SQL autocomplete, but that's the notebook autocomplete, not the fancy Databricks SQL autocomplete. Okay, so we've seen lots of changes happening over the past few months around ML flow experiment permissions, and again, just exposing more places you can go and edit and change those permissions. So you used to be able to add permissions, now you can go and edit those permissions and change them from the experiment page itself. Again, just minor changes. I know we're not dug into that too much. And then this is the other new bits, data profiles, which I was having to play around with. It's like, oh, what's that tab? That's new. So essentially now, if you are bringing back some data and you want to go, I want to know more about that data, you get this extra little option now. So we're just doing this. I'm saying, go off, read my data frame, just reading some delta. I don't actually need to tell it delta, I'm just doing from a table. And it brings back some data. And I'm like, profile that. Now that goes and it runs a little data profiling task and brings me back a little report saying, oh, this is the data that's in that particular data frame. So I've got information for my different columns I've got in there. So I have various different standard deviations, zeros, mins, medians, maxes, all that stuff. I can filter it down and go, now I just want to know about the strings. Tell me about some strings. And I get, you know, how many unique values, frequency, different occurrences, that kind of stuff. So going back different info depending on the data type, just as a kind of nice little data profiling overview of what's going on in the world, really. So that's now baked in. That's now a thing that you can pull back and just go, whenever you have a data frame, you can go and hit that button and get data profile. Now, I was having to play going, that looked familiar. That does look similar. And it's actually because it came out as a new dbutils a few months ago. You got this dbutils.data.summarize. You can give that a data frame. And I believe that runs the exact same thing. So we should see, yeah, so the report is same kind of details, right? So essentially it's a shortcut to the dbutils.data.summarize built in. Whenever you run a data frame now, you get that little data profile tab. You can just click that button. It'll run another query on your data and it'll come back with some nice summaries for you. So if you're experimenting with data, you're doing some data profiling, you're trying to understand something, you can hit that button and it'll just work nice and out of the box. Quite nice. And then final thing is another Delta Live Tables update. So previously, if your data changed, it would just say it failed. It'd say it failed and then retry it. Was changed it now, so it doesn't come back with a failure. It now says, oh, there's a schema change, and then it restarts, and then it'll kind of try and evolve with it. That's all to do with how you're using autoloader. So autoloader can do its own schema evaluation and automatic restart. In the event of a schema change, automatically update that schema and evolve, and then keep going. But obviously, you don't want that to be a failure. It's a deliberate failure going, oh, I'm going to stop the stream, update the schema, restart again, and then everything's happy. So that's all it is. They've just changed it. So it comes back as a schema change. And then things are pretty good. Not tested out yet. Not had too much of a play with continuous Delta Live Tables, actually. But I think that'll be an interesting one to go and dig into in a future video, and we'll see how that all works. So yeah, load of sneaky little things cropped in right at the end of November. And now let's have a look at December, right down to the bottom, and we'll go up. Again, we're not too late in December. We're still only the 22nd today. But yeah, we'll just kind of wrap up what's been in there. And there might be a few that go into the January update. We'll see. So first, there was a breaking change that went out for cluster creation. So there was some kind of wildcarding of, if you're putting in $signs anywhere in your cluster statements when you're automatically creating clusters. So if you're using kind of pushing out anything to, via DevOps, create a particular cluster, you had to escape it. And then it removed escaping, so you no longer need to do it. And then that broke a load of people's scripts. And so just, you need to work out whether or not you need to do it. If you're seeing errors around that, or if you're doing any kind of cluster creation automatically through Terraform packages or through the CLI or anything like that, you probably want to check that out. So be aware of that. Go and have a look in and go and see what's happening on there. Okay. The new Databricks Runtime, we'll take a look at that separately. That's currently only in beta. I've not seen a GA for it yet. Again, whether or not we'll see that GA throughout the month of December, we'll see. I don't know if people are taking holidays. I am. But we'll see. Okay. Support extension for 8.3. I know that was a bit of a worry for people. But again, it was just running out 8.3. And it sounds like they pushed it to the end of January. But again, if you are still on 8.3, you do not have a lot of time left. You have a month grace period to actually update. But there's so many new things in the latest runtimes you probably want to update anyway. But it's just if there's any library dependencies that can be broken because of it mainly. Okay. So secure connectivity. There's two networking ones actually. So if you are particularly in the Azure Southeast region, you need to make sure that you're updating your routes. Essentially, the place that you had the routing table that you had to use to be able to connect to your cluster securely has now changed. Go and have a look at that. You need to change your routes. Other one is with metastores. So additional metastores are going to be coming. So if you have, again, defined custom routing tables going to the relevant Hive metastore in your location, you need to update it. And again, there's loads of details for that. Just a bit of a heads up. Going, if you have set all this stuff up to be able to talk to the metastores, then you're going to have some new ones that you need to look at. Main thing, if you're doing it, you'll know if it applies to you. If you've gone through the sheer pain of setting up all those user-defined routing tables, and you're looking at this and going, oh, I'm in West Europe or North Europe, then you need to go and have a look at that and see if you need to update your routing tables as well. Okay. Interface improvement for Delta Live Tables. So one of the things that we did have is you can now, if you had a load of things that you wanted to do custom, but they've not built it into the UI, so you created your pipeline and then had to hit edit on the config and then go into the JSON and then play around with the JSON directly. You can now do it directly from the create pipelines button, which is nice. The other bit is you can dig into the data quality values inside your processing graph when you're having a play with things. So again, just making some tooltips, making it a little bit nicer, showing some more stuff, be a little bit easier. And then the final change, that is it. We are at the end of things, is Switzerland West going GA, or at least available. So Switzerland West is a weird Azure region. You need to have specially requested access and being permitted to use that region in your subscription. And if you have done that, then you can now create Databricks workspaces in it you couldn't previously. Again, you'll know if it applies to you. Okay, so all of those changes, as usual, with the platform rollout, it's kind of a phased, staged rollout. So again, I think most of these are, between now and January the 6th, I think most of these things are coming. So some of them you might see already, some of the things you might not see until early in the new year. And then we'll see that. Okay, so that's the main platformy things. Let's have a quick look at that new Databricks Runtime. So bits and pieces we've got in here. And again, this is still in beta, so there may be one or two new changes that come in by the time it goes GA, but we'll see. So first thing, files in repos. So files in repos is the new thing we had a look at fairly recently, where we can do things like put in a Python class, put in just a random Python script inside a Git repo, refer to that inside our other scripts, be they in the same repo, in the same feature branch, or even just be a deployed notebook in our workspace. It can refer to things in files and repos, and now we can refer to those from Spark Streaming. So if we had something that was in a Git repo that was a little lookup JSON config file, or a little script to run, or anything that we happen to have put in inside there, we can now refer to that directly from Spark Streaming if you need to. It's quite good, so it has that context. There's a new function for updating a mount. So previously, if you'd mounted a lake to Databricks and you wanted to change it, wanted to change the password, you'd cycled the key, you changed the user, changing it to mount to a different thing, you had to just drop the entire mount and remount it, which could be slightly painful and slightly disruptive. We've now got this new update mount command. So you can go and just update the settings for an existing mount rather than recreating it. Again, useful, especially if you're doing things like key cycling and all of that. Delta now supports renaming of columns. So whenever we had things to do with schema drift inside a Delta table, we'd have things like, you have like allowed minor schema drift. So adding a column, great. Upcasting a data type, great. So going from an int to a long, yeah, that's fine. It's getting bigger. I'll go from a long to an int. So this kind of things were minor schema drift and they were allowed. You could evolve the schema of your lake that way. Things like dropping columns, renaming columns, and downscaling data types, you can't do. It's like, no, you're basically changing the table too much. So being able to rename the column is very, very good. Now, it does mention this specifically. So whenever you write to a Delta table, it'll actually tell you the version of Delta that you're using. There's a writing version and a reading version. And to be able to do this, you need to update the writing version of that table. So you'll probably see that a lot currently. So if you write to a table, say the minimum writer version is 1. If you read from a table, say the minimum reader version, the minimum writer version is 2, the minimum reader version is 1. This is just a compatibility. It's essentially what version of Delta are you actually using to read and write to that particular file. So to update it to go and use the latest, then you'll need to be using the Delta writer version 3 and the Delta reader version 1. You don't have to have a different version of Delta to be able to read the data, which means there's not going to be any compatibility issues. Everyone can still read your Delta files, but if you want to write to it and it to understand renamed columns over time, all that kind of good stuff, you need to update to writer version 3. Be aware. But the rest of that, I've not actually seen any examples of that. What the name mapping actually is, how that works, how the rename works, whether we can use it inside a merge, or whether it's just explicitly for a table DDL. We'll do alter table, rename column. Maybe. Will it work with schema drift? We'll be able to say, well, I'm going to evolve. How does it know it maps to the original column? Loads of questions there. Don't know how that works. Going to be having a look at that. But certainly interesting that they're moving. And again, more and more features in schema evolution is a great thing to see. Okay. runtime information is now going to be in Delta. So that's so the Delta transaction log. Tons and tons and tons of info inside there. Loads of really good audit info. So this person did it. This was the type of operation. These were the parameters. This was the cluster ID they did it from. This is the ID of the notebook that made the change to that Delta table. You get all that nice, rich auditing info captured, but you didn't get the version of the Databricks Runtime. So if someone did a change and it actually didn't behave how you expected and they broke things, you could look at it and say, well, they're using that cluster. But you can't say, well, at that point in time, that cluster was version 10.1, 10.2. Oh, they're using a beta version and they were testing something out. They shouldn't have been doing that in prod. You know, all that kind of stuff. You can now do that. So now your transaction log will have the engine info column to tell you the version of Databricks that was actually running. So that'll be stored on your transaction log and it'll be exposed when you do describe history. Okay, dbutils.fs.ls. So that's I don't know what it officially stands for. I always call it list structure. So essentially, if you're using it to try and explore what's in a lake, in a mount point, and you go dbutils.fs.ls, this particular folder, and say, here's all the files that are inside that particular folder, the size of them, all that kind of stuff. And now it's going to expose an additional column, which is modification time. It's just useful for saying, has anything changed in here? And because that is essentially just returning a data frame, you can put that into a query. You can query things and say, tell me anything in this structure that was changed after this date. List a subset of files, all that kind of stuff. Super useful. So at least you now have that as something you can have a play with, just being updated. And the final change, again, that is the end of things, is a new Spark SQL function of approx top K, which if you're a Snowflake user is probably fairly familiar. And that's essentially just saying, give me the top things in this particular aggregation, but using an approximate and only use a subset of the data to do it. So it looks like that. So approx top. So which column you want to go from, how many you want to limit it to, so the top 10 categories, top 10 groups, and then how many records it should sample to give you that result. So in this case, if I had 10,000 records and I ran this, you'd only read the first 100 and it would give me the first 10 groups if I was doing it over customer ID, for example. So it would be the 10 customer IDs in that 100 sampled records that had the highest counts. The kind of thing I'm looking for. It's going over a certain column, certain number of value, how many different groups to retain, how many aggregated groups to retain, and then how many columns to actually go into that aggregate function. And you can just use it nicely. So you can use it in Spark SQL. You can use it, again, that's just still using it in Spark SQL, but inside a PySpark expression function. And you'll get this kind of thing, which is quite nice. So you'll get a struct inside that particular column that will have basically an array of item count, and then you can do other things on top of it. So nice way of essentially kind of reducing the granularity of stuff, but without doing a full massive query over things if you have a huge amount of data. Which again, combined with things like the summarize, data profiling tab, just kind of more, for me, that kind of thing is more for that data exploration, data experimentation, data profiling. I don't know if I'd use an approx. If I was doing very, very formal ETL calculation, here's my data. But still, if you've got vast amounts of data, it's a very useful function to have. And that's it. Then obviously there's the usual stack of new libraries, new bugs, not new bugs, bug fixes. It's good. We're getting better, not worse. And lots of stuff all baked into it. That is all good. Loads of stuff happening in there. The final thing, I guess, we want to have a quick look at. Let's go over here. Do I have a thing? There we go. The other thing that I don't know why that's not mentioned. So big thing that happened only a couple of days ago is Databricks SQL, what used to be called Databricks SQL Analytics, but Databricks SQL is now generally available. That is the big fanfare. That is the big news. So we've been having Databricks SQL, so SQL endpoints, the whole, let's pull this back in over here. The whole thing we've got over here of this whole SQL area with SQL endpoints and Photon baked into it and dashboarding and Cloud Fetch and all that real BI focused stuff has been in preview for so long. And so it's always been, if someone said, should we use this? It's like, it's really good, but it's in preview. Oh yeah, no, that would actually fit that scenario really well, but it's in preview. So it's always the how risk averse are you with how you pull these things together. Now, absolutely, it going GA makes a big difference. It going GA means we can say, yes, did you use it? Really good. Actually, it's now available. Go nuts. So obviously this is the kind of the marketing push, lots of examples of how it's done, why it's out there, all that kind of stuff. Again, main message is it is now generally available, so you can go ahead and use it. And why that's not in the release notes, or why not that's not the kind of the big fanfare all over things, I don't know. But either way, that is now a thing. So if you have been holding off on getting into it, holding off and looking at it because it didn't have a clear GA date, it now has one because it was a couple of days ago. So you can now go ahead and use Databricks SQL in anger, test out the endpoints, test out the photon to see if it actually speeds up the kind of workload. Remember, it doesn't speed up every kind of workload. And yeah, see what kind of performance you get from it. Cool. So that is my list of all the stuff that has gone live, that has been released, that is available for you to have a play with. All the lovely Christmas presents that we have to play with over this given month is now all there for you to go nuts with. So, as I said, not a huge amount in terms of the actual platform releases. So interesting stuff. Certainly some good stuff for doing data exploration and having a play around with those things. And yeah, mainly Databricks SQL going GA is huge news. And hopefully seeing a lot of stuff happening in that space, especially with the ANSI SQL compliance being enforced by default very soon. So you'll see behavioral changes in Databricks SQL. And again, making a lot of SQL people very happy in terms of using that space. And that is all I have for you today. So as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to let me know down in the comments if there's any of those bits and pieces where you're like, oh, that makes it, oh, I like that. Oh, or even if there's, oh, why? Why would they do that? Why would they make that change? Really useful to know what you think and what you're doing with, and yeah, how you're getting on. Otherwise, until next time, catch you later.